Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. It's extremely hot today. I'm barely managing, and I had a pretty long work day. So forgive me for this not being quite as long as I might have promised. Though we do have plenty of topics, and I want to go through all of them. However, I have also alluded in the past to integrating gaming more into my streams just to have a more. I don't know. I am entertaining myself, but I guess it's even more entertaining. But certainly, as a visual background, it's much more appealing, right? So that will most likely not be happening today. One part of that reason is actually when we look at TG Fan Pro, is that my Mac, just from charging, running an Ethernet adapter, and then all the bullshit that's happening usually with my streams, is already running at 4600 to 5000 RPM. That's most likely also an issue of the beta release. It seems that the Mac really likes to get the fastest charging possible. We actually look at the battery, right? I mean, sure, right now it is not going to charge at the full 100 watts now that it's at 84%. But before that, it just breezed through like from 60 to 80. And you can see, by the way, some visual bugs when it comes to Tahoe. So still be very careful when it comes to installing anything like that. Yeah, but otherwise, everything seems good. We have Max in the chat saying basically he is listening from the gym, but no super chats today. Damn you. No, of course, man. I fully understand that. Like, it's not every time. We have our Mr. Yap King joining the stream. Riley put Subway Surfers gameplay in the bottom of the screen. Yeah, if I ever do that, I will actually Minecraft myself. For those of you who like listen to live streams, you know what those words mean. It's because of YouTube or Twitch terms of service. Before I do that, before I go the full TikTok route and have to have Subway servers, like half my would it be even then, right? Would it be like a zoomed in, like 1/3 of the screen is like my stream, then 1/3 is the actual Mac or maybe an iPhone in landscape, right? Just to show you like new iOS 26 features. But then another third would be Subway Surfers, right? That would be Jesus. Before that ever happens. Yeah, cheers, guys. I am drinking, as per usual, my patented water plus frozen raspberries combination because it's the coldest drink I can get that stays cold for this time. Yeah. But otherwise, that's pretty much all the introductory stuff out of the way. I should note that I'll probably be streaming on Thursday, definitely not tomorrow. Tomorrow it's 36 degrees Celsius or 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Yikes. I'll just gonna be relaxing. If maybe I go to the gym actually because they have air conditioning. That's also your reason, right, Max? That's what you put in chat. Yeah, we Europeans are dirt poor when it comes to air conditioning. Apparently, especially if you rent an apartment, you cannot just build it in, even if you do have money for it. It just won't allow you. Jesus Christ. Yeah, and before I get into all the topics of today, because we do have plenty of good stuff to discuss, I just want to give you all the usual shout out to subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. You guys know I love interacting with a lively live stream. And of course, beyond all that, leave a super chat, leave a super sticker, become a channel member, become a Patreon supporter. All of that is also in the links for the channel. Yeah, I'm not hip with the new generation. Yeah. Which is fascinating because Subway Surfer is an old game. Why was that TikTok trend specifically about Subway Surfer? That's so weird. But I guess it's also just something that you can visually concentrate on because the person is always in one spot. Yeah, Jesus, Riley, you as per usual, you derailed me. Before I get into the actual big news, I do have some personal tech news, which I did. It's not like it's a big expenditure, to be honest. But Basios, which I believe stands for based on users. So I never knew. I saw like a YouTube video about them, but basically they have a new family of power banks. It's a super slim 5,000 milliampere hour battery. That's the one I got. Then there is a pretty small one with a kickstand, though that one is a little bit thicker, and that kickstand looks a little bit flimsy. So to me, thinness was really the priority. And you get this, but in a 10,000 milliampere hour capacity. So, but it's a lot thicker. So I basically got for around 30 euros. It's, I believe it's like 40 something MSRP, or, and there were like a ton of like free vouchers on Amazon for all of that. So I basically got it for like 31 bucks. And yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it. It's 15 watts G2. That being said, obviously my Mac, my iPhone doesn't support 25 watts. Plus, even if this was 7.5 watts, I wouldn't even care too much at that point, because all I honestly care about here is that it's thinness and yeah, I bought a power bank in this economy, but no, actually, to anybody watching from the United States, because of tariffs, stuff going from China to the United States is a lot more expensive, right? It has a 30% tariff on top of it. That's why we in Europe are actually getting flooded with somewhat cheaper Chinese stuff. We have Rosa joining the chat. Hello to everyone, to all the usual subjects. So I will inform you how it's working. I am thus far pretty pleased from what I've seen about it on the internet. I also like buying stuff that's generally new. Basically, this was released over the last couple of weeks. And I also like not going with Anchor, because I'm getting like once every 2 months, I'm getting an email from Anchor about like some fire hazard about like their charging banks or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm gonna try something different. I know that Pitaka also has like a power bank a little bit similar to this. Pretty thin. I'm not sure how good aramid fiber is going to be at cooling. So I'm getting this, plus this is like half the price of the Pitaka one. So, and yeah, even if I don't fully love it, given the fact that I'm getting the 17 Pro Max with way better battery life than my degraded 15 Pro Max after 2 years, right? Smaller battery capacity, close to 80% degradation. It shows me at 86%, but it has shown me 86% for like the last 300 charge cycles. So I believe I am at around 650 charge cycles now, and ever since like 350, around 400, it has been at 86%. I think it was like at 87, and then it dropped 1% in the last year, which is obviously garbage considering I use it every day. It's constantly subjected to a lot of heat. I use my iPhone as my camera for video streaming. So even though it's charging, and I'm not sure if iPhones even have pass-through charging so that they would ignore the battery, that's still heat inside the product that gets generated. Plus, I try out every beta, which includes all the battery issues that betas are known to have, all the stability issues that might require a restart or a reboot. So yeah, to me, upgrading from the 15 Pro Max to the 17 Pro Max will be a huge upgrade. But until then, I'll have that power bank, and I'll probably just give it to my mom afterwards. So I really bought it in mind with being super slim for myself, so I can take it to the gym, so I can sometimes more often forget to charge my phone at work without being stressed out. And that down the road, it also goes to my mom and fits nicely into her handbag and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense to you. This is not a sponsored thing or anything. If Basius wants to sponsor me, I'm open to that after trying out the product. If it's a good product, hey, I'll be happy to advertise it. But yeah, that's about it. when it comes to intro and personal tech stuff for me. But let's get into the really, really, really big stuff, which is, and this is contrary to a lot of our usual news, this is not coming from Mark Gurman, this is coming from Min-Chi Kuo. Apple to release cheaper MacBook powered by iPhone processor. Now, when I initially read just the headlines for this, I was very skeptical. But then it really occurred to me, what kind of pricing would this product strive for? And how that can coincide with not just using an iPhone processor, for example, but actually even using a slightly older iPhone processor. So let's get into the details. So according to analysts, and pretty good analysts to be honest, he does definitely have his trajectory on a somewhat downward trend, though he has mostly stabilized. Yeah, he's not on Mark Gurman level anymore. He's definitely not on Russ Young level when it comes to even specific leagues. He does also like to give long-term predictions that usually don't quite pan out. However, this is relatively short-term as a rumor, and that's why I'm really interested. I probably should have said even in the title that it's for late 2025 or early 2026. So let's get into the hard details here. So according to Min-Chi Kuo, Apple is working on an affordable Mac model that will be powered by an iPhone chip. In fact, in this case, we are talking about the chip of the iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max, the A18 Pro. In fact, the A18 Pro thus far has not made its way to any other Apple product. For example, the iPad mini, which a few years ago actually had the same chip as the iPhone of that year, is powered by the A17 Pro. Obviously, the base iPad is powered by the A16 chip. So plenty of things here to consider. So it will definitely be a somewhat powerful chip, but it's not an M-class processor. It would mean at the very least losing 2 performance cores, and now versus the M4 also losing 2 efficiency cores. So that's a notable downgrade in multi-core performance. However, if we are looking at anywhere over like 50 watt hours, something like that, when it comes to battery capacity, this chip will absolutely slay when it comes to battery life. Like, the smaller the die, the easier it usually is to like just get it to low power consumption, especially when it comes to like kind of like standby-ish tasks, which can be literally standby. But even what I'm doing right now, except for the streaming, of course, right? Loading up a web page, yeah, sure, that will spike up your CPU, probably just 1 core for a short amount of time, which helps that the A18 Pro has higher single core performance actually than the M3 chip, and in fact gets very close to the base M4 when it comes to that. However, for most tasks on the Mac even, you're probably fine with A18 Pro level of performance, and if battery life is your absolute priority, well, there you go. Now, again, this does make it really funny that we would be getting an A-series chip again like this on the Mac, but not actually the iPad, right? I mean, like the iPad Pro being on M4, right, and that being part of what makes it super expensive is funny. But even the iPad Air is now an M-series chip. So that actually makes me wonder if maybe by the time of like the A19 chip or something like that, Apple could conceivably either keep the cost the same and just give us other value, more storage or something like that, give us 16 gigabytes of memory on the iPad Air 2 as well, right? But when it comes to using that chip, if Apple thinks it's fine for the Mac, honestly, I don't see why they also wouldn't find some room for it on the iPad. Maybe at that point wouldn't be the A18 chip, but the A19. Don't forget that Apple will be switching to TSMC's 2 nanometer node by the time we get to the A20. but that will be a lot more expensive per die area than 3 nanometer from TSMC, which will be their last FinFET node. It will probably have close to perfect yields going forward. So Apple will have a good incentive to keep utilizing A18, A19, M4 chips down the road. So that could end up actually in a very interesting lineup where some products are way cheaper than we usually associate with Apple. Like right now, the cheapest Mac that Apple officially offers is the $999 MacBook Air, and that's for 16 gigabytes of RAM configuration, right? Previously, the M3 MacBook Air originally started at $1099 and with 8 gigs of RAM. So that's like a $300 price reduction over the course of one generation. Could we get like another $200-300 cut of Mac pricing by just replacing the M4 with an A18 chip? Would Apple be fine giving this chip 8 gigabytes of memory rather than 16, like what's now standard on the M4? Could they give it maybe even something like 12 gigabytes as some interim solution? There is a lot of interesting stuff that Apple definitely could do. The rumor also talks about the colorful casing options for the new Mac. This definitely seems like Apple looks at this a little bit like the base iPad. So the base iPad, the 10th generation, now kind of 11th generation iPad, right? That's a very colorful one in comparison, especially to the Pros, but even to the Airs. So I wonder if Apple would see that kind of as a MacBook SE or MacBook E, but obviously they would just call it MacBook, right? I mean, they have iPad Airs, iPad Pros, iPad Minis, and a base iPad without any suffixes that makes it the cheapest. And I think Apple would have MacBook Airs, MacBook Pros. For all other confusion regarding Macs, look at iMacs, Mac Pros, Mac Studios, right? So that's kind of like the iPad mini in the lineup. But then for the base model, it's just MacBook. A MacBook E, exactly, Riley. It's the MacBook in disgust, basically. And we have Ben Vinny joining the chat. Thank you to all of you who contribute a lot to our Discord. Ben Vinny, you're absolutely, together with Jimmy James, one of the absolute greatest yappers on Discord, while Riley's the master yapper. Here on YouTube, you definitely do a great job on Discord. So anybody watching, look in the links in the description of this channel and consider joining the Discord. There's a lot of fun to be had here. And we have Solomon also joining the chat. Why is Apple making this? M1 series are great even in 2025. Well, don't forget, M1 is not there anymore, right? M1, I mean, you can kind of buy if your store has like extra supply of that, M1, M2. But one reason that I really wanted to actually discuss this, is there any 120 hertz Mac under 800 pounds? Unless we are talking like really like refurbished or just like discounted all this clearance, I would assume that the M1 Pro could come close to that price. I mean, it was $2,000 at launch, so that's what, like 1,800 pounds. Could it have lost about half of its value over time? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and you definitely would get something at around 1,000 pounds. M1 gonna lose support OS? No. I actually don't think M1 is gonna lose OS support. I think that M1 is likely to lose certain feature support, just as we have with every, like, I mean, the best example is obviously pre-A17 Pro iPhones not getting Apple Intelligence features, pre-M1 chips, originally not getting Stage Manager before Apple expanded that, and now obviously with Windowed app, it's a completely different story. But M1 is gonna become less relevant. I mean, just from the single core perspective, and that's what I partially want to discuss. There's MacBook Air and Pro, yes, but those start at a lot higher prices, and we will actually later discuss how great Macs are currently selling. So Apple supposedly had an almost 30% year-on-year growth with Mac sales, right? And how that relates to this move, because look at the actual performance, right? So single core performance. Now, it should be noted that as somebody who uses the A17 Pro and regularly get close to 3,000, these results usually have like 2-3% off. Maybe 5% depending on the chip. So this is more like 3,600 points, while the M4 is more like 3,700. But let's just say 3,500, right? So think about where that takes us actually when it comes to Mac benchmarks and the M1, right? As some of you have pointed out, that the M1 obviously still works plenty fine. By the way, look at this gap between like M4 generation and M3 generation. That's just positively insane that we're still getting something like this actually in the year 2024. But look at actually the M1, right? So that's, you have to keep scrolling. That's the max version. Here, base M1, 2,400 points. I believe my iPad gets to 2,500 or something like that. Maybe I just win in every silicon lottery when it comes to Apple, right? So that by itself, we are talking about a roughly 50% increase in single core performance, right? Let's look at multi-core for the M1. Have to keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So here we are, 8348. Right, in that regard, we're actually pretty much exactly in lockstep with the A18 Pro performance. 8,500, roughly 8,600 in multi-core. I just really wanted to show you, I actually had the same thought as you, Solomon. It's like, well, what about the M1, right? But then I thought, man, but for lots of stuff, the A18 Pro these days is faster than the M1. And even architecturally, when you think about it, the one upside that the M1 still would roughly have is in GPU performance. So the A18 Pro delivers 32,000 in a Geekbench Metal score. When we look at our Macs, where is it? M1. Right, it's roughly in line with that, but also M1 is helped a little bit just by the fact that generally you get great cooling for it in comparison to the A-series chips. Even a MacBook Air will struggle less to passively cool the M1 then even the current iPhones struggle with the A18 Pro. And think about it, even if Apple still reduces cooling, that means that now with the A18 Pro, which is way more efficient than the M1, has hardware accelerated ray tracing, mesh shading, right? All of that future forward stuff, a much faster neural engine. It has roughly about the same memory bandwidth. The M1 has 4,300 mega transfers memory on a 182-bit bus, on a 128-bit bus, and the A18 Pro has 7,500 mega transfers memory on a 64-bit bus. So the memory is almost twice as fast on a bus that's about half the size. That also helps, by the way, with power consumption, having a small memory bus. So again, the reason why I believe Apple is doing this is because they believe the A18 Pro matches the M1 in crucial ways, like overall GPU performance. Probably if Apple can clock it a little bit higher in the Mac chassis, it could actually outperform the M1. It will be a lot more efficient doing that, and it will give you newer architectural features. and it will give you a lot longer battery life for the same battery capacity, which will either allow Apple to give it a smaller battery and achieve roughly the same battery life as the MacBook Air, save on cost and everything like that, hand down those savings to the consumer mostly. We know Apple likes their profit margins. But overall, yeah, I do think that it's very specific that they decide to do this with the A18 Pro. It's basically about matching and even in some ways exceeding the M1. Solomon, someone said M1, M2 will lose support and M3 will be the benchmark. It will, but not for the overall operating system. So that's very important to consider. Actual high-end games, yes, they might actually down the road perform better on an A18 Pro than an M1, especially if they're built from the ground up with mesh shading. However, mesh shading has existed on PC hardware for quite a few years, and I believe the only game to actually push that was Alan Wake 2, and even that was so seen as so wrong by the community that they're basically leaving behind non-mesh shading hardware that I believe they actually gone back and introduced a better solution for it, because they obviously had a non-mesh shading solution. I believe for the consoles should support it. But yeah, basically, this will apply to games and maybe some higher end applications, but not to the entire operating system. This new Mac sounds awesome, but I don't know how much I would like with 60 hertz. I don't think that any one of us will be too interested in a like non-promotion device, because we are enthusiasts. We actually do like getting either the latest or greatest, or potentially a fantastic deal, like getting a last gen product at like 25, 30, 40% off, right? Because we know, oh, either something new's about to come out, or it just came out and it really pushed down the prices. So that's what we like to do. However, those are not the products that tend to sit on shelves and sell to consumers directly. Consumers want to go into the store. They want to see the comparison. At that point, the A18 based MacBook at, let's say, $700, right? What does it have versus the MacBook Air? What does it not have, right? And then if you want to, of course, go above and beyond, that's where you get your MacBook Pros, different sizes, different chip options, all that kind of stuff, right? So let's continue with the actual rumor, because we've done a lot of speculation already based on top of that. First is, of course, as I already pointed out, the more colorful casing options, but also Quo says it will have the same 13-inch screen size as the current MacBook Air. So that's actually fascinating, because, as you know, the MacBook Air with the M2 redesign actually got a new display. Now, it's not a groundbreaking display in any way. It's 60 hertz, it's 500 nits, and all those kinds of stuff that make it to us enthusiasts. But at the $700 price point, just the fact that it's like 1600p roughly, that alone would put it above a lot of the competition. Now, again, the $700 price point I'm saying is very speculative. I almost assume I say that in mind with like a lower RAM configuration, be it 8 or preferably something like 12 gigabytes of RAM, though Apple might want to reuse the memory they have already sourced for the iPhone 16 Pro models. So I do not think it will make sense if it's not at most $799 base pricing, unless the MacBook Air happens to get more expensive, which, by the way, it also will. Don't forget that. The MacBook Air is also rumored to get OLED screens. Now, it will not get the super high-end 1000 nits tandem OLED screens from the MacBook Pro that it's supposed to be getting next year. But over 2027 and 2028, I do not think that Apple will stick to a $999 MacBook Air. I think that it's very likely that it will be 1099, maybe even 1199. But at that point, Apple will also give it more base storage. So while, again, I always point out to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, right? It's not just a better model than the 16 Pro Max. It is more expensive in its base store configuration, but its base configuration actually offers the same storage for $1199 as the iPhone 14 Pro Max before it did at $1199. So it basically just cut off the 128 gigabyte configuration at $1099 and offered you just starting from the 256 gigabyte configuration at $1199. I could see that happening with a MacBook Air as an OLED screen and other maybe like a 2 nanometer chip push the price, push the component costs up, and there's just something, just no escaping that. By the way, especially in US dollar, the US dollar has not been doing too well recently, and the euro actually like increased like almost 10% over the dollar. It's close to 1.12 now. It's close to 1.2. Sorry, I believe it's now at 1.18. So Apple might not even have that much of a choice but to increase pricing, even if they will find some ways to offer more value. Benveni saying you'll be back in an hour. I'll see if I'm still there, man. But at that point, you can still check out the stream, of course, afterwards. Riley saying, I honestly stopped caring about 120 hertz. Oh, the home screen is not fluid. What I'm gonna do with my life? And honestly, that's how a lot of people see that, right? I don't. I like ProMotion. That being said, I always like think about it when I use like my TV, for example, on the home screen, and everything about it is 60 FPS, 60 hertz, right? The same goes like the PS5, even home interface is 60 hertz. My Apple TV home interface is 60 hertz. And yeah, it doesn't bother me. So it's probably just like, oh, I'm used to my iPhone being this fast, my iPad being this fast, my Mac being this fast. But as long as I'm not used to literally everything being this fast, I can still go back and enjoy a 60 hertz screen or even turn on low power mode. Which, by the way, low power mode on iOS 26 is really, really bad. It doesn't just reduce your screen to 60 hertz, which would be acceptable, but it actually, I don't know how much it cuts off of your CPU power, but it just results in actual frame drops. So it's not just less smooth than 120 hertz going down to 60, but it really feels like it has like, I don't know, like 60 millisecond frame time spikes or something like that. Solomon saying once you go 120 hertz, there's no going back. It does depend slightly on the panel. Like I would probably prefer a 60 hertz MacBook panel over 120 hertz of mini LED. Now, I'm specifically talking just about the smoothness factor. I actually like the colors of LCD tech generally better than OLED. That's why I haven't updated my iPad to the Tandem OLED M4 version. But when it comes to a pixel response time, that's actually an issue we discussed when I was talking about the Switch 2 in one of the prior streams. You will find that OLED has like several orders of a magnitude better response times than LCD, and Apple actually uses LCD on the MacBooks, on the iPads without any overdrive. So those are pretty slow screens. Apple kind of improved on that with quantum dot technology on the M4 MacBook Pros. But yeah, it's still OLED is still way faster. Solomon saying, I never use low power mode in iPhone, maybe on Mac. For me, it's actually the other way around. I never need it on my Mac. But even on my iPhone, I use it like once a month. I just noticed it because when I went to the gym the other day, I had forgotten to charge my iPhone before it. So I was at like 60% and it was super hot that day, so and super sunny. So I had my display brightness at fullest. While going to the gym, I usually walk like 20 minutes from home to the gym. So it's like early energizing and back. And I wanted also to go some grocery shopping afterwards. So I really thought, you know what, before you risk running out of battery, because you also still have some phone calls to do on the way home, just set it to low power mode. And that's when I saw, oh my God, this isn't just 60 hertz. This is frame drop nation here. But actually, let's continue here. So 13-inch screen size. What I am speculating on here is that maybe Apple plans on updating the MacBook Air with thinner bezels or something like that. So this device could conceivably get about the same bezels as the MacBook Air, maybe a bit thicker just to differentiate it visually. Also, there is obviously potential that Apple could move away from the notch design as they redesign the MacBook Pro next year. So maybe they think, oh, we're just going to reuse the MacBook Air chassis, the MacBook Air screen, roughly, right? Maybe even find ways to make it a bit cheaper. Maybe they go the base iPad route and give it a non-laminated screen, right? Which would create more reflection and glare. But then again, you could probably just bump up display brightness to 600 nits. And with all the energy savings of the A18 Pro, you probably won't end up with too bad of battery life. If you can hear some fan noise, that's my Mac. Let's actually check it out, the TG Fan Pro. It's almost running at full tilt. I'll actually do this, right? I'll actually unplug MagSafe and see what that results in, because this is specifically a macOS Tahoe thing. So my Mac is not doing anything to overburden itself versus regular streams. My 32 gigs of memory is still half empty or half full, depending on your perspective. Nothing I'm doing here is eating up a lot of CPU cycles. And yes, I know the Ethernet adapter can consume a bit more power, but honestly, it's not like it even gets you like the full 1 gigabits, because my home internet doesn't support it. So yeah, I'll check on that in a few minutes if it actually has cooled down a bit, because we are at 100% battery, so we should make it through the stream. But if I need more power for whatever reason, I'll just connect back my MagSafe. Unfortunately, it isn't yet clear how much more affordable this model will actually be. Quo says Apple is targeting production in the 5 to 7 million unit range for 2026. That's about how many Macs Apple sells in 1 quarter. So Apple would expect it to either drastically increase overall sales or to take up roughly 25% of overall Mac sales. So this is definitely something they believe in, especially on the higher end side of 7 million. Now I definitely do believe Apple will expect some cannibalization of MacBook Air sales if it is too cheap, quote unquote. But it would be definitely a very interesting move. And I believe that the PC laptop market will be very, very worried about this. We might start seeing like 32 gigabytes of memory, 1 terabytes of storage, really going below the $1,000 mark. So they could say, oh, Apple's devices are like $700 for 16 gig and 256 gigabytes. Well, and maybe Apple's $1,000 device is 512 gigabytes, right? But ours is like 1 terabytes with double the memory at $850 or something like that. Maybe not necessarily at MSRP. Maybe MSRP would be still something around $999. But then eventually, like as most PCs tend to do, would sell at around 10 to a 15% price reduction. So yeah, they do also make some of the same comparisons that I have done here. So with the A18 Pro matching and exceeding the M1 in many ways, right? And architecturally, it still would be ahead of something like the M2 because of some of the features we've discussed here, right? Hardware ray tracing, hardware mesh shading, compatibility with the latest Metal FX upscaling through a faster neural engine and stuff like that. So So yeah, I think it's $699 with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. This would be, I honestly think this would be completely unbeatable. If it is $699 but comes with a noticeable RAM reduction, I think at 8 gigabytes, I could see it still as somewhat acceptable. At 12 gigabytes, I actually wouldn't mind it at all. I mean, even using my Mac all the time, I have 32 gigabytes, but rarely, like, and that makes my Mac actually very aggressive in utilizing memory, right? So it saves more in memory in advance so that later my tasks are faster than a base system would, right? So this is very notable because I still think that my Mac would roughly function even in this kind of streaming scenario at 8 gigabytes. Definitely at 12 or 16. Now, at 8 gigabytes, it would use a lot of storage swap, so that's not really desirable. And the second I do something like gaming while streaming, that would be definitely a challenge. But this would be a product for people who don't do those things, right? Like when you just think about the A18 Pro itself, it's very likely that you would then get what? One headphone jack, if that, right? I mean, iPads don't have headphone jacks. Macs still keep them for some reason. But you would get one USB port, probably just 10 gigabits, like the speed that you have on the iPhone. Maybe Apple could find a way to add an extra Thunderbolt chip to the motherboard to deal with that, but I don't think they would. I think it would be very similar to the old 12-inch MacBook. I basically believe it would have a USB-C port on one side and then a MagSafe port on the other, right? Because I don't see, I mean, I could even see them giving up on MagSafe because MagSafe is like magnets and things like that, so it consumes a bit more money. So if they really want some way to make it as cheap as possible, why not make a single port Mac for the people who are fine with that? Forget Mac gaming on that. Well, again, it would match the M1 performance, right? But yeah, the issue is even though it will support support stuff like hardware ray tracing and mesh shading, it just doesn't have the raw compute power to really accelerate those things too much. Now, the reason why I'm actually so interested is because Mac sales have been doing fantastically. And this is something that I have found very funny over the last 2 years. So basically, Mac sales had a big spike with the pandemic and M1 and partially early stages M2. Overall, M2 didn't sell too well, but that's partially because M1 still kept selling so well. And when around the M3 came out and the later cycles of the later stages of the M2 cycle, a lot of people started saying, oh, see, the enthusiasm is gone. And I'm like, no, we had literally a world-changing event in the pandemic, right? And people bought their PCs, their Macs, and now those people are waiting for an upgrade. Nobody who has an M1 should be really considering an M2 device or an M3 device. To be quite honest, I still wouldn't even say people should be running out and getting M4s. Now, of course, if you look at it realistically, especially when you look at the Max and Pro chips, right, over M1, that's a 60-70% increase in single core performance, right? Depending on if you're willing to also like side grade potentially from like the base M1 to like an M4 Pro, for example. In multi-core performance, 25,000 on the M4 Max. Let's actually look at the M1 Max that I'm familiar with because that's the one in my MacBook Pro. You will actually find that it's literally half that, right? And if you're willing again to not just upgrade but also side grade or upgrade, considering how you want to call it, let's say you upgrade from like an M1 Pro, let's say you're upgrading really from an M1 to the M4 Pro, right? Where does that leave us here? So base M1, that's 8200, maybe 8400. And let's look at the M4 Pro. Right now we're looking at 2.5 times the performance, right? So there is a huge reason to finally start considering that. But then again, M5 will be even faster and probably about the same price as M4. M2 will come with a redesign, tandem OLED screens on the MacBook Pro. Yeah, but also there are other utilities, of course, that have improved. I cannot deny that, like Thunderbolt 5, better Wi-Fi support. Though down the road, for example, with the base MacBook, it does also open up the question: will Apple give this a cellular option? Right? Would be an extra opportunity for another $150, right? Would be an opportunity to finally tune macOS to cellular support. So Apple has a lot of opportunities here to make money, is basically what I'm saying. M3 is worthy. I play lots of Windows games on my M1, and I wish I could upgrade to M3 Max. Yeah, but this is also a very different experience overall, right? Like, for example, base M chips, unless you get the MacBook Pro version of it, they're passively cooled, right? Then versus the Pro and Max chips, you get gigantic differences of power consumption. And like you have to pay very disproportionately for that price increase. So yeah, don't get me wrong, I obviously understand that. I did get a fully configured M1 Max myself. It's not even the binned version, but not everyone needs that. So and some people might actually, to go back to what Riley said previously, some people might just play iPhone games on here, stuff like Subway Surfer or whatever, and they will have like potentially like a Word document or pages, keynote numbers, whatever, right? And then they will have like Subway Surfer next to that in like full screen. So they open it after class. Yeah, I think that a lot of people will be plenty happy with that, even though there is one thing that I dislike about it, which is it will be, unfortunately, a downside to all of us enthusiasts who are pushing for really, really big games on Mac. Because if this becomes a very, very popular portion of the Mac lineup, unless it literally just expands the Mac sales and doesn't cannibalize MacBook Air or MacBook Pro sales whatsoever, which I mean, it could happen, but it's all very speculative at this point. Like, there is a chance that developers will be like, you know what? So many Mac users are on the A18. Let's just keep on focusing on porting like basic iPhone and iPad apps to it, rather than like some of our more advanced like ray tracing based games and things like that. Riley, Clash of Clans on the MacBook gonna be fire. Yeah, that's what you're kind of gonna get. But let's actually talk about Mac sales, because as I alluded to in the before days, basically this quarter was really good across the board for PC sales, but it's Mac shipments that really stand out at a 29% year-on-year growth. Let's actually see if that links directly to the market. So overall, sales are up 15% in the United States. There is one thing to consider. This is not fully natural. So part of this does come from people basically impulse buying tech before the tariffs on China began, right? Or before the price increases from the tariffs, because that's also important. A lot of people are currently saying, well, my devices haven't gone up by 30%. obviously the tariffs cannot be so bad. Those companies are eating profits. That's not what's happening. A lot of companies, especially when it comes to technology, still, and even to a degree, still have, but definitely had inventory of technology that came into the United States before tariffs. And also, those companies also had inventory on markets with way lower tariffs than from China directly to the United States. So, for example, if you had inventory in Canada or Mexico, you could import it into the United States, but then you would have to resupply that inventory for Canada. But guess what? Canada doesn't have a 30% tariff on China. Now, you cannot do that anymore because obviously tariff regulations include country of origin, but you could do it still with gadgets that were shipped before the tariffs actually were enacted. So this will definitely not be continued in the next quarter. However, this quarter was really good. Almost 17 million desktop and notebook sales, 15% growth year over year. You can actually see here also like both consumer and commercial doing pretty well. So we do have a lot more tech these days with like AI in mind and shit like that. And they actually even posted what they believe are some of the core drivers of sales. First, let's look at Apple's performance. So Apple had almost double the industry growth rate. In fact, the only company that came even close to that kind of growth was Lenovo, but of course HP and Dell still remain number one, with both owning almost a quarter of the industry. I believe this includes a lot of stuff like pre-built PCs. So when it comes to notebook sales, I wouldn't actually be surprised if Apple is maybe not number one, but at least close to it. But yeah, I know that like when it comes to pre-builds, HP and Dell really, and they don't sell, again, look at this chart, right? They don't just sell, of course, to consumers, but there's a huge part of the industry that's commercial. So that's companies buying like pre-built PCs and stuff like that. And Canalys also actually gave us some really big drivers for purchases, and this is why I really wanted to put this into perspective with this new cheaper MacBook. So first, it's an attractive upgrade offer, and this is the prime example for this is actually the M4 MacBook Air, right? So the M3 MacBook Air was initially $1099 with 8 gigs of RAM. Then it was upgraded to 16 gigabytes when the M4 MacBook Pro came out. And then the M4 MacBook Air comes out, is better than the M3 MacBook Air, but actually also starts at $999, which means that it's roughly a $300 cheaper thing than you would have expected from a year or even 2 years ago. Better specs. This is where we come to comparisons. Not only, I am trying to analyze this from an Apple perspective, not only is it faster now than the M1 or the M2 even, but think about comparisons to Intel MacBooks, which is still where many upgrades are coming from. Now, there is like an order of a magnitude of a difference when it comes to real world benefits. And the next one is actually very important to this specific MacBook that we just discussed, which is I want to have the latest. It's easier to sell someone a new MacBook with an A18 chip, which is based on 2024 tech, rather than sell them through refurbished or through clearance an M1 MacBook Air with roughly the same like raw multi-core performance, admittedly, maybe even more USB ports, maybe better capabilities like Thunderbolt, for example. And again, there could be other downgrades on this device, like a non-laminated screen or something like that. But this device that will come out late 2025 or early 2026, guess what? It will be the latest. Maybe definitely not the greatest, but people will have far more trust in it, lasting a long time, getting a lot of software support, right? Gift, that's usual. That makes it strong for something like the holiday seasons. Broken beyond repair, that's specifically when we are talking about like really old stuff. Honestly, it's less of a problem with Apple, but granted, because of Apple's poor repairability usual, these two, broken beyond repair and broken but I don't want to repair it, basically at this point, they do still play into consumer behavior. And next is still crucial when it comes to anybody upgrading from Intel MacBooks, which is it's too slow, it's too outdated. Don't forget that Intel Macs have already not gotten stuff like Apple Intelligence and a lot of Apple Silicon based features. And starting next year, basically that's it. That's the end of the road for them. It's macOS Tahoe, and then it's up to the farm up state to live with the dog that you had when you were young that totally still alive, right? Employer fresh and employer upgrade, that's very important because Macs are actually becoming more popular in enterprises, though while they are more expensive, especially per storage and RAM, before getting up front. But because of their battery life and because of their reliability, a lot of companies these days are saying, you know what, we're going to pay a little bit more up front, but we're going to reduce our IT cost with that, or we can grow our company without growing our IT, right? And basically get MacBooks so people have less hassles. I think this is a very good list, and I think that almost all of it would actually benefit this theoretical rumored MacBook that we've discussed. And you see, we spent now almost 45 minutes discussing this specific gadget and what it could mean for the broader industry. Now, there is more, believe it or not. And I almost wanted to ignore this, but there are now more sources coming out corroborating this. And they're basically saying that the MagSafe circle, the Apple logo on the new iPhones will move slightly downwards rather than being in the exact center of the product, right? When you look here from a Z-axis perspective, that's bottom, that's top, in the middle is the Apple logo. Here, it would be in the center of whatever device is left under the camera island, right? So, and with it would also come a redesign in the MagSafe ring. So it, I believe with how this design looks, it would still keep all the compatibility necessary with the previous MagSafe accessories. It just has some fewer magnets. It's probably not that big of a deal, especially if the magnets are a little bit stronger. But basically the Apple logo on, for example, a clear case that shows you all those magnets would be kind of hugged, right? Like you consider that it's like you would be hugging the Apple logo in here. And when I initially saw that, I was a bit skeptical. Nerd World saying, which browser are you using? How's your experience so far with latest macOS? I am using Safari. You can see that, by the way, with the latest macOS Tahoe bug, which is it puts those dark lines under every tab that's not currently being actively used. So, and Apple even specifically said in the developer beta notes that this is a known issue that's actually new from Tahoe Beta 1 to Tahoe Beta 2. Overall, though, I mean, I have obviously mentioned some bugs. I mean, even when it comes to battery life, that's pretty quick battery degradation, even during streaming. But for example, my Mac runs hot while charging, which, yes, it obviously always gets warm while charging, especially with the 100-watt charger, but not as hot as it does under macOS Tahoe. Initially, when I was setting it up, it was a bit slow, but that's primarily when it was indexing stuff for like the new Spotlight search and things like that. So overall, though, the fact that I can stream on it, still can do Discord and all that stuff, and even do all of it simultaneously, right? I think that that's a pretty good beta overall, especially, again, we are not even looking at like public beta release. Public beta would probably be somewhere early, somewhere late July. Sorry, I'll have to increase the strength of my cooling fan because the room is heating up from my Mac, from my constant talking, plus again it's 32 degrees Celsius today and 36 tomorrow, so I doubt the night is even gonna be cool. So that's why I'm a bit sweaty and why my hair is very curly too. I'm very Mediterranean that way. What do you think about the new Finder design? Is it improved since the late search function were broken? Finder design? I mean, the Finder design hasn't really changed. I mean, as usual, you get like the different tabs on the left that you get on macOS Tahoe in general. I'm kind of lukewarm about them. I don't love them, nor do I hate them. When it comes to the Finder icon, I honestly couldn't care. I've said that I liked when it was reversed, but then Apple reversed it with the latest beta. So, yeah. But for all of this, Nerd World, and I actually do that right away. You can join our Discord because we do talk about all of this over there. All the stuff that might be a tiny bit too nerdy or a tiny bit too in detail for the live streams, especially since I cannot stream every day because of my work, because of personal stuff and everything. I do tend to just say, join the Discord. It's really great for discussing stuff like that. Nerd World, you even became like our number 3 yapper at the moment, so congrats to that. Collecting a lot of XP along the way. So hopefully all of this helps. Hopefully the community that's growing here can help you too. But all of this is coming from Majin Buu, which I should, of course, note. We do, or we have now expected the new camera island for a while. Seems like it's roughly correct. There have been no leaks or rumors saying anything against that. So you would still get that tri-camera stovetop design. But you would basically get your LED flash, your microphone, and your LiDAR sensor at the end of your device, right? And obviously, since it shifts a lot of the design aesthetic towards this camera island, now there was a question, do you want to keep the Apple logo here or do you want to place it over here? Now what's nice is it does not result in a replacement of the MagSafe accessories, right? Apple could have shifted that entire circle downwards, but that would not play too nicely with certain accessories that are somewhat tall and that would push them basically under the device or across that boundary. And I think that that's just something Apple really wanted to not do. Plus, to be honest, when I just saw this, I was like, well, but how are they going to deal with the MagSafe ring? To be quite honest, I think this actually looks pretty cute. And as long as the MagSafe connection is still strong, which is very important, and I will call Apple out on if they have sacrificed functionality for aesthetics, though I don't think that that's going to be a major issue here. I do think that this actually can work. And we have Miley YOLO joining the Discord. Great. That's why I love you guys. This is why I do point this out. It's really not just to... Look, and I've said it time and time again, and I'll keep saying it. I'm doing this as a hobby, right? If I wanted to do this as work, well, for one, I would give up the benefits of being a doctor, which is not great. But also, the other downside is simply I would have to restructure my time. I cannot be a successful streamer, even streaming 2 hours every day, much less every 2, 3, or 4 days, which I sometimes do. But I do love the growth of the community, not to benefit me as a YouTuber because one day I want to replace MKBHD, but I do believe that this space is missing slightly different coverage, very in detailed coverage, nuanced coverage, and I'm not saying that others are incapable of that, but they do have, for example, podcasts for it. I do not think that the podcast form factor is perfect for these kinds of leaks and rumors, especially if they come out on an almost daily basis. I do want to be able to react to them almost instantly. And with a podcast, you usually have to wait. It's coming out roughly once a week when you look at MKBHD or even 9 to 5 Max podcast. And with my live streams, I can be this middle ground between a 2 or 3 hour podcast at the end of each week and between a 5 to 6 minute video summarizing those leaks on Tailosive Tech, right? And I think that it's not just obviously the media of the coverage, right? Like live stream versus pre-recorded video. It's also the interactivity, and it's also a very specific community that comes together with this intent, right? I do believe that live streams attract different kinds of people than pre-recorded video. Definitely, I thought of doing shorts for iOS 26, but honestly, I do not think that the shorts community is our community. Even if it could help grow us, I would rather stay really small here when it comes to actual live stream viewage, but just have you guys really engaged, really passionate, joining the Discord, sharing your own opinions, helping others who are going through similar things with their software, with their hardware purchases. So I've yapped it now more than enough. I apologize for this, but I just wanted to point this out. I don't do this regularly. But so this is coming from Majin Buu. He also says that this is basically the company that he works with making accessories. So I wonder if that means this is a company he works for, but I doubt that. He seems to be somewhat relevant in that sphere, so maybe he has investments in those companies. But yeah, basically Apple found as good of a solution as I think they could have for this, though it might make it necessary to do a tiny bit more research to find out how how strong the MagSafe magnets are on each particular accessory, right? But hey, even using a little bit less magnets and everything else like that, maybe that helps Apple find some internal space for, I don't know, more battery or something like that. It's also being, and this is why I'm covering this is being corroborated by Sony Dixon, not just the repositioned Apple logo, but also the different charging coil, like at least like the charging coil design. I mean, MagSafe is not specifically, this is not the charging coil itself. These are magnets basically aligning with the charging coil, which is copper. That's not the same thing, but yeah, just I think he knows that, but it's probably he just put it in the simplest way for people to understand who listen to this. And yeah, Sammy Dixon has been pretty correct when it comes to coverage like this. Majin Buu has a mixed but overall pretty successful track record, and those, especially both of them aligning on two of those things, which is not just the repositioned Apple logo, which by the way here it looks like there is more space, but this is a Majin Buu render of a clear case. So this looks like there is way more magnets here. Like with the Majin Buu render, the magnets would end roughly about here, which this gives us 2 more magnets on each side of the circle. So that actually makes me worry way less than this image about potential strength of MagSafe accessories and things like that. Also, it makes me think that it's definitely looking highly compatible with everything that has come before. I don't think that this will come with like a MagSafe 2. I think this will come a MagSafe optimized for iPhone 17 Pro. Nerdworld, Mark, do you also going to cover Samsung Z Fold 7? Yes, I do want to, but next week is actually going to be a nightmare. So I'll divulge some private information. So I have my mom visiting. We also have friends of the family visiting, specifically from Tuesday to Wednesday. And I do have a good friend coming over. So and visiting from fucking England and everything. So it is going to be a very, very difficult thing for me to stream on what is it, Wednesday? Yeah, it's Wednesday at 4 p.m. my time. I will try to make the time. I've already taken some time, not off from work, but I'm basically working half day that week. The issue is that I am getting planned up in a personal way, and I wish the Samsung event was at least on Thursday or something like that. But yeah, and afterwards I'm actually taking a week trip to my family, so I might not stream as much as I would like to, but hey, please still subscribe, like, share, and hit the notification bell so you actually know when I'm going live. However, if I'm not going to be covering this with a live stream, I will be giving my opinion on Discord and partially on Twitter. Fold 7 chip is boring. Yeah, but the Fold 7 design is new. The Flip 7 design is new. I do really find it almost grotesque, especially since there are rumors that the Fold 7 might be more expensive than the Flip. Yeah, obviously. It will be more expensive than the Fold 6, right? So the fact that Samsung still hasn't found a way to line up their Fold launches with the launch of the latest 8 Elite chip, honestly, that makes it much less appetizing, much less interesting for me. So you can see, by the way, that in TG Fan Pro, my Mac has come noticeably down in heat. And now that I've plugged in MagSafe charging back in with the full 100 watts, because I lost almost half the battery in an hour, which this is definitely a bug. It will be interesting to see if it gets even louder, my fans and everything, because it's getting all hot and bothered. Yeah, but this was a rumor because I didn't even put it in the title or the thumbnail because it was kind of a bit last minute. But honestly, I know that this community cares a lot about Macs and iPads, obviously iPhones too, just because of the size of iPhones. But it is still a different story when it comes to my iPhone coverage than my chip coverage, my iPad coverage, my Mac coverage. And this is not the biggest news overall, but I do think that we are now having kind of painted in a way a very detailed look about the iPhone 17 Pro. We now understand the camera bar. We now understand the repositioned Apple logo and the slightly redesigned MagSafe magnet situation. The Fold 7 is 8 Elite, but you should understand that, yes, I understand that's happening in like July and the product is launching mostly through August. So I understand that it's all happening before the 8 Elite 2, but it's happening 1.5 months before the 8 Elite 2. It would probably become a November release if they actually aligned it with 8 Elite stuff. I know that Samsung does not want that because that's way too close to their regular Galaxy S series. But it's just like it's 2 months before that chip is finalized, and you're like, man, like. Plus, if Samsung wasn't charging those premium prices, I think I would look at it differently. Right now, I own both 16 Pro Max and S25 Ultra. To be honest, the Galaxy AI is awesome. Yeah, you will probably notice this as you watch me. Maybe you can check out some prior videos. I do not care too much about AI features, and I have tried out Galaxy AI. I obviously use ChatGPT for certain stuff, which is way better than all of that, to be quite honest. But yeah, I'm fully fine with admitting that. I do dislike saying you hate Apple AI because it is a very different solution, because there is nobody doing what Apple does with the same focus on privacy and on-device processing. But again, you don't have to care about it. You can like that it's primarily running from the server and everything like that. So you will find that this channel is actually extremely positive towards Android ownership, Windows ownership. We talk a lot about chips from every vendor, whether it's the latest Xiaomi chip that was introduced. We actually reacted to the Geek Arena review of that. I do check out the latest Android hardware when I have the ability, or at least I react to reviews by MKBHD, Mr. Who's the Boss, other reviewers I respect. So yeah, we'll find plenty of opportunities to entertain you, Nerd World. But I think that's about it for the story. And I am streaming now for over an hour, and now I'm really feeling the fucking heat rising in this room like crazy. So we do have some small quick shot news. So Pixelmator Pro gets updated with Apple Intelligence support. That's primarily writing tools and image playground. Now I don't know how much you are gonna be writing essays inside Pixelmator Pro, but hey, and image playground is a pretty basic image thing, but hey, if you're like me and you're designing, for example, your thumbnails in it, maybe that will make it a bit more likely for you to try out some image playground stuff. Don't forget that image playground, starting with iOS 26 and macOS 26 Tahoe, actually integrates with ChatGPT. So not only can you use like basic image gen by OpenAI, but I believe if you have a premium subscription, you will actually get those more premium features, which is it's faster and higher quality. So yeah, again, Apple Intelligence is not just Apple Intelligence, it's also a gateway similar to how Safari can be used with Google Search, Bing Search, DuckDuckGo, and all that stuff. Apple Intelligence is also a gateway for other AI assistants to be integrated with Apple's apps, with Apple's operating systems. Don't forget, writing tools, for example, also integrates with ChatGPT for stuff that Apple doesn't want to handle. The other is when it comes to actual AI stuff, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman reports that Apple might actually give up on their own internal large language models. Now, at least when it comes to Siri, it does not say that about all of Apple's AI efforts. So would Apple change their LLMs in favor of an Anthropic model or Claude? No, wait. No, ChatGPT is OpenAI, and Claude is coming from Anthropic. I hate those names so freaking much. But will they replace their LLMs when it comes to like image cleanup? I wouldn't bet on that, especially if they still focus on on-device processing. But when it comes to general intelligence, when it comes to conversational nature, like all the stuff that's supposed to come to Siri, there is a chance that that could happen. Also, funny enough, after that piece of news and rumor or leak was posted yesterday, Apple's stock went up 2%. So the market seems to be pretty positive about Apple partnering with somebody else. Both companies are training versions of their models that work with Apple's private cloud compute servers. So at the very least, it might be a question of Apple might differentiate between models for on-device processing and on-device for private cloud compute. Maybe everything happening on-device would still be Apple-based, and then other stuff would be, for example, from Anthropic. So far, Apple has found that Anthropic's AI models are the best for Siri, and Apple and Anthropic have already discussed some preliminary financial terms. Bloomberg says that Anthropic is asking for a multi-billion-dollar annual fee that increases over time, which is why Apple is also considering partnering with other companies like OpenAI. So what's interesting here, if you know, for example, Apple's supply chain when it comes to displays, storage, all that kind of stuff, you know that Apple likes actually using multiple suppliers so they can kind of put them against each other and bring costs down. Now, again, multi-billion-dollar annual fee, it's not too much for Apple, especially if it results in them not having to invest multi-billions into their own LLMs and having to continuously improve on them. That being said, it obviously is a very different question if we are talking 4 to 5 billion versus are they asking about the deal that could be in the 10 billion plus range down the road, especially as Mark Gurman mentions here that it would increase in cost over time. Also interesting that potentially ChatGPT could be cheaper. Not sure, to be quite honest. Apple has been training an LLM model for a future version of Siri, but it's no secret that Apple has been struggling with AI again. Apple is trying very different things with AI. You can like or dislike it. I don't understand this focus on why Apple needs to do the exact same thing with AI as other companies. I mean, look at even Samsung. What does Samsung do for Galaxy AI? Jack shit. It's a multi-billion-dollar deal with Google and Gemini. Now, I'm not actually sure how much it costs Samsung right now. There is a chance that for the moment they're actually getting it very cheap or even close to free because Google just wants to make Gemini work as good as possible. They want to collect the data for it, so to improve it further down the line. And because the financial situation is pretty finicky here, this is why Samsung still hasn't actually committed to a final cost for Galaxy AI. Don't forget that Samsung initially said that it would run out like Galaxy AI and then it would cost you a certain amount of money later on. They kind of still haven't specified when exactly is it running out and how much will it actually cost. So, and Apple wants to avoid those kinds of issues for their consumers, of course. So it will be interesting to see how these kinds of AI situations pan out over the next couple of years. Yeah, but again, I still fully believe that Apple will launch an AI Siri with in 2026. My prediction is roughly on March to April of next year. Now, if they launch it and it's actually underwhelming, then I think it will 100% push them into the hands of somebody like Anthropic and having to pay a lot of money. But if it launches and it actually runs pretty well, and for some things Apple can direct you to Google Gemini, to some things for ChatGPT, to some things for Anthropic, maybe they create a generalized API so other AI assistants other than ChatGPT could also link to Siri for general knowledge. Honestly, I'm not worried about Apple Intelligence. My most used AI feature is Genmoji. So I am very fine with quote unquote waiting until they get it right. I know some people really like AI, and for general knowledge stuff, I will admit ChatGPT can be quite cool. But even yesterday, I was like a little bit lazy and I asked ChatGPT, how many cores does the Nintendo Switch have, right? The original version. And it told me, oh, it has 8 cores and one quad-core cluster is based on like A57 or something like that, and one is based on A53, right? And then I asked about the Nintendo Switch 2, and what was fascinating about that is that it actually didn't know about the Switch 2 because the Switch 2 came out after its training was completed. So it's not like with a regular search engine that basically gets upgraded with every search entry. It's really like AI does have some downsides that still need to be figured out. But we do have one big piece of news to discuss, and it's also coming from Min-Chi Kuo. Supposedly, Apple has 7 head-mounted products in the work, and one of them is actually slated for later this year. So this is interesting for Min-Chi Kuo because Min-Chi Kuo is kind of the king of saying, oh, Apple has this product. Like when you think about his rumors about the Apple Silicon big iMac, right? Or like a new Pro Display XDR or something like that, he usually says, oh, it's coming out in 2 years, and oh, it got delayed, now it's coming out in 2 years. Here he's actually committing to some products coming out as early as later this year or early next year, which is just like 7 months away, basically. So, according to Kuo, Apple views head-mounted devices as the next major trend in consumer electronics. We have discussed on this channel channel in the past how Tim Cook specifically sees great potential in something like glasses and augmented reality in general. The company currently has at least 7 projects in development. Now, it should be noted, development could mean some of it is taken less seriously, some of it could be an early prototype of just like a general successor. So we'll get through the details of the individual products, comprising 3 Vision series products. So we do have something like Vision Pro sequels, Vision Air that's much thinner and lighter, and 4 smart glasses variants. Now, this is very important because I do really always have to say this, specifically when we talk about Min-Chi Kuo, or sometimes Mark Gurman does the same thing. Whenever somebody says Apple is working on 4 of these products, don't forget that a lot of what Apple is working on is designed to get canceled. Some of is designed to get like some insight into certain design, right? Like maybe one prototype is really focused on being super thin. One prototype is being designed with new materials in mind. And then in the end, one prototype could either unite all of them or maybe none of them and just be a simple upgrade. So this does not mean that Apple will launch 4 smart glasses anytime soon. 5 of these products have confirmed development timelines, so you also can guess which ones are definitely not on that 5 list, which is many of the 4 smart glasses variants, while 2 remain TBD. So he actually posted a pretty nice explainer image about this. So kudos to him here, which he does take his Twitter leaking pretty seriously. So supposedly an M5 based Vision Pro is coming out late this year. Again, whenever we talk about late this year, could it be pushed into like February or March of 2026? Of course, the same goes true for the A18 Pro MacBook we discussed in the beginning of the stream, right? But it's roughly late this year, and it's based on the M5 chip. However, it's supposedly mostly the same product. So let's talk about the M5 Vision Pro first. Kuo believes that Apple is preparing an updated M5 Vision Pro version, which obviously is a big upgrade from the current M2 generation. We don't know if that will also come with a chip swap for the R1, right, which is Apple's kind of reality co-processor, to use some old PlayStation language. But basically, it's using to combine all the sensory input, all the camera input to reduce the load on the main M5. It actually is so advanced and so separate that it actually uses its own high-speed memory. So that's very interesting as a setup here. So now, again, it's going into mass production Q3, so that could mean anywhere from a Q4 launch to a Q1 launch and maybe even Q2 of 2026, especially if anything comes up, it gets delayed or something like that. He said other specs will remain unchanged. Now, this is Min-Chi Kuo. It's very important. Min-Chi Kuo is not the king of individual tech specs. I would be, for example, very surprised if the new Vision Pro doesn't give us Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7 and a new Bluetooth spec, right? But when it comes to other specs, he primarily means it's not drastically changing like the display technology. It's not changing the overall form factor. But details like RAM, storage, Wi-Fi specification, usually Min-Chi Kuo focuses way less on that. It's also estimating to sell between 150 to 200,000 units. Basically, this holiday season, this would be a bit much, by my opinion. This would only work if this comes with a noticeable price decrease. Like, at the very least, what Apple should do is give us a lot more storage. But even then, I think anything above $29.99, which is already ridiculously high, it just does not sell well. Like, over 3,000 is firmly high enthusiast territory, right? That's what my Mac cost. It was like 3,300 euros. and I am using it, and I keep intent on using it for years and years down the line, and then I'll hand it down, right? So, but with a Vision Pro, because it does not replace like your Mac, I mean, it could replace your iPad, but would you really? So yeah, 150,000 to 200,000. It's not unrealistic, but we would have to see like $500 to maybe $1,000 price reduction, especially if they want those sales actually by the end of the year. Next is the Vision Air, and this is where we end up here. It's supposedly entering mass production Q3 of 2027. So again, either a late 2027 launch or early 2028 launch. This is a redesign. It's focusing on weighing a lot less, 40% less, and it will use plastic and magnesium alloy rather than the current materials. It does say it's currently using titanium. That's not true as far as I understand. Vision Pro uses aluminum, not titanium. Correct me if I'm wrong here. It will feature a highest-end iPhone processor, which at that point should be an A21 Pro. And if Apple believes that the A18 Pro is good enough for a base entry MacBook, I could see that they are fine with using an iPhone chip in here. There's also a question of what kind of co-processor, if any, they would be utilizing here. But for example, the focus on fewer sensors, fewer cameras, fewer LiDAR scanners, that could result in maybe just offsetting all that workload directly on the iPhone chip, or maybe create a much smaller reality co-processor, right? So maybe by that point we'll have an R3 Pro and like a base R3 that's way smaller. It does depend on what Apple sees as more usable for that scenario. And again, there is a possibility that they just offload all that workload on the iPhone chip, because at that point the A21 Pro will be plenty powerful. Next is a second-gen Vision Pro. This is bullshit. This would be a third-gen Vision Pro. I know that they mean like, oh, it's actually the redesign that makes it second generation. No, that's not how it works. This is the second generation of Vision Pro. Just because it does not get a redesign, it's jumping like 3 processor generations. This deserves to be called Apple Vision Pro 2. But hey, Quo calls this a second generation Vision Pro, will feature a new design, a Mac class processor. So at that point, we're probably looking at an M7 or something like that. We're looking at a product going into mass production in the second half. So this is not even quarter specified. It could be as early as June. It could be as late as December. Basically, going into mass production in the second half of 2028. Again, that could mean a launch in late 2028 or early 2029. He claims that it will also be cheaper and significantly lighter than the original, so probably incorporating a lot of lessons from the Vision Air. Cheaper, Apple probably will find some way to make something like plastic a little bit more acceptable to the Apple Vision customer base. So yeah, it makes sense why it would be cheaper. Plus, at that point, something like micro OLED will be a lot cheaper, not just because there will be just more VR stuff out there, but also because by that point, Samsung is going to be competing with Sony for supply of Apple's Vision Pro panels. In fact, we have discussed previously on this channel how Project Muhan is rumored to be to have an even higher density screen than what Apple uses on the Vision Pro. So that would make Samsung, unless they screw up something with HDR handling, because Apple Vision Pro is also not just high resolution, it's also extremely bright and vibrant. Maybe that would make Samsung not a great supplier for a future Vision Pro, but think about a Vision Air at that point, right? They could use way cheaper panels for that, or they could wait until the cost of current generation panels comes down significantly. So a lot of opportunities here. Now, what's important is that we did cover 3 of the the 7 products that Min-Chi Kuo alluded to, and all of those 3 Vision Pro products have production dates. And those, to me, actually make a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to Apple glasses, this is where it gets a lot more iffy. And half of the products mentioned here do not have a production date, and a lot could slip into long delays. I mean, we went through all of that with foldables. Like, we expected a lot of Apple foldables potentially by 2024, or at the very least for this year, 2025. Now it seems to be a late 2026 thing. So take all of that with a grain of salt. A lot could change, and a lot of it could also just be misconstrued in the current stage by Min-Chi Kuo. First is the first generation of Apple glasses, and that's where we kind of get the most information. Contrary to recent reports that peg 2026 as the possible debut year, this also is something that I was really doubting, because Apple's foldables are slated for a late 2026 to early 2027 launch. I always found it unlikely, the idea that Apple would launch foldables simultaneously with glasses. I think that would take a lot of media attention away from their foldables, and potentially from the glasses too, but though I do think that the glasses would overall dominate. Plus, if they do launch them too early, that does risk jeopardizing the future of the Vision Pro, which right now kind of stands out as almost like the Mac Pro of Apple's AR and VR products, right? It's in a completely different price bracket. It is expected to sell a lot less than the glasses, but it is still there. But if the glasses come out too soon, do a lot of things too well, there is a chance that Apple would not sell the numbers they hope for the Vision Pro. Let's start with the first gen. Apple's first crack at Meta Ray-Bans, which again, whatever. It's direct competition, sure, yay. It's not, but okay. Smart glasses competitor is expected to enter mass production in the second quarter of 2027. So we are looking at a second half of 2027 release with an estimated 3 to 5 million units sold. So we're looking at outselling the Apple Vision Pro by an order of a magnitude and then some. Kuo also says there will be multiple frames and material options, which again does make sense. They also have like different sizing options for Vision Pro. I could see even Apple partnering with some established glasses company for this. Obviously not Ray-Bans at that point, but similar to how they have partnered with Hermes on Apple Watch bands, I could see some options, not for the actual hardware obviously, but just for like the frames themselves and something like that. Key features will include voice control, gesture recognition, photo and video recording, AI-powered environmental sensing, and audio, and it's unclear if built-in or they will depend on something like AirPods, because obviously Apple Vision Pro do feature their own high-fidelity speakers, so it will be interesting what Apple does here with glasses. Should be noted, of course, all of this requires that Apple's AI efforts do bear some fruit by that point, so either actually making Siri work by themselves or switching to a third-party LLM supplier like Claude from Anthropic. So this is similar, but even more pronounced in a way than Apple's HomePad, right? Which I don't believe will come out before Siri gets updated, because I think a lot of coverage of that product will immediately be, oh, but Siri is not fixed yet. And similar to those glasses, I don't think that Apple will launch them before they're very confident in their AI efforts. Then there are 2 XR smart glasses. Okay. According to the report, Apple's first pair of glasses with a built-in display is expected to enter mass production in 2028 and will also feature gesture and voice control. So that's notably different. So this feels like a very much like an accessory And again, I could actually see Apple canceling that if it's way too similar to what Facebook is doing, and maybe by that point, what Google could be doing, and maybe just prioritizing this, which is a display that will use liquid crystal on silicon and waveguide technology. So, pretty cool screen overall. This would be very, very cheap, in my opinion, overall. Um, this would be kind of like an extra camera rather than an actual product with a real user interface. I would have zero interest in this product, to be honest. If anything, this product just feels like a pair of glasses plus a camera. It's very un-Apple like, but then again, they could still give it features that make it stand out, similar to how AirPods are just a wireless earbuds brand, but also have a lot of features because of their in-house processors than other brands. However, this I do believe is the main bread and butter that Apple hopes to make work with glasses, which is a big focus on augmented reality, which is what XR stands for. It would also require either like a decently powerful iPhone to be paired with it, or have some kind of on-device processing. So this is where Apple's chip designs could really come into their own. Quo also notes that Apple is developing a second display-equipped model. Now, whether or not we're talking about a sequel or a more powerful model next to it, or a slimmer model, that is unclear here. So, and when exactly it will come out might also depend on, well, first, will they actually make it to mass production in 2027? How well does it sell? What does it mean for this entry-level Apple Glass? So, yeah, again, I do not see too much of a future for this product. If this happens, I almost see this as a one-off before this becomes a more expensive but also way better solution in general. And maybe a second gen display model could also be a lot cheaper. But yeah, a lot of this is just very speculative, because this is a not very detailed rumor that I am trying to put something on top. I am not obviously lying to you in any way, but I am trying to analyze it as much as I can. And the other is a little bit of a I don't know what even to say about this. It's a display accessory. A quote says that work on a cable-bound accessory for the Mac and even the iPhone has been paused due to weight challenges, but still could be resumed at a later date. This is very important, because all of this could happen to any of the products we are talking about. It could be paused in development. It could be significantly delayed in development. It could be some of it effectively canceled. So I am trying to tell you to take all of this with a big, big pinch of salt. Precisely because when it comes to 2-year or off predictions, when it comes to Min-Chi Kuo, he does not, at least recently, have a great track record about this. A lot of what he has predicted for 2024, 2025 is now supposedly coming in 2026 and 2027. So let's see if maybe by 2027 he will be telling, oh, it's coming in 2029. So also, I am just wondering what this display accessory exactly is. Like, is it just a pair of glasses that's VR, but it's cable bound, which the Mac does not really have the app situation for that. I mean, literally, Apple is inviting for this to just be a fucking porn accessory at that point, right? I mean, think about it. There are no good VR games for Mac. I mean, sure, you could maybe run through crossover a Steam VR game. That's considering that all the translation tools will even work well in a VR game, which are more complicated in that way. So this would just be used for porn and some movie making stuff. And then also, but even then, a big movie studio does not need a display accessory really for a Mac. They'll just get a freaking Vision Pro and pair it to their Mac. This is a porn accessory. This is why it's canceled. Apple does not make porn accessories. Yeah, whether by design or out of necessity, Apple is playing the long game. It should be noted there is nothing on the market except for this, right? This first generation Apple glasses that, again, I am putting some question marks on top what exactly their final shape will be like. But this this would be very much like, I could be actually very critical of those when they come out, and they don't really stand out with anything like Apple-y, right? Versus Facebook's Ray-Ban glasses. Sure, they would work so much better with all your Apple accessories for notifications and camera syncing and all of that. And that alone is probably enough to justify producing 3 to 5 million of them. But it would really be a very uninnovative product. I mean, there could be something in there that I'm not seeing. Again, this is not the most detailed of reports, but this is where Apple could shine. A great screen, maybe something that either nobody has or only a very few have, similar to how they utilize micro OLED on the Apple Vision Pro. An own processor to actually control that chip, to control the display rendering and everything, which, again, this is where Apple Silicon could come into play. Out of all of this is the most interesting product. However, these are the products that I 100% believe are in the works. That being said, out of all of this, I could actually see a second-gen Vision Pro being a little bit on the chopping block if neither M5 Vision Pro nor Apple Vision Air sell in decent amount of numbers. There will be a big question if Apple pivots entirely to glasses and maybe doesn't even redesign the Vision Pro, but just at some point gives it an M8 chip and calls it a day, right? I mean, granted, this second-gen Vision Pro or this redesigned Vision Pro does seem like it will actually probably be better for Apple to produce, as it seems to be cheaper and lighter. So just logistically, it might make sense to just launch a redesigned Vision Pro, no matter how M5 Vision Pro and Apple Vision Air perform. But yeah, down the road, there is a big question mark. Will Apple keep producing $3,000 plus Vision Pros? What does mean a lot cheaper? What does significantly lighter mean when the Apple Vision Air already is trying to fill some of that? If the Apple Vision Air is, for example, $1,500 and this is $2,500, there's a potential that neither sells too well. So yeah, all of that is going to be very interesting down the line. And with the glasses, it's even more complicated because some of it is obviously like, sounds to me like a prototype that probably was never taken too seriously internally, but hey, Min Chi Kuo heard about it and is now reporting on it. I do believe that this will be the core focus of the next decade once it launches. I do still think that we are still in the decades of iPhone, right? 2 decades basically, from 2007 to 2027, in my opinion. That being said, I do think that if this launches in 2028, sure, I mean, we got iPads in the meantime. We got Apple Vision in the meantime. We got AirPods in the meantime. We got even something like Apple Watch, which I guess maybe you could say the last decade was very much also defined by wearables and not just smartphones, right? But I do believe if Apple makes this a year after the 20th anniversary of iPhone, there's a good opportunity that this will be the next big focus. And I could even see Tim Cook only stepping down once they successfully release this product, right? Kind of how Steve Jobs stepped down after the original iPad, after the iPad 2, to be honest. And Tim Cook has been in charge of everything, but you know what I mean, right? The legacy of all of that. And soon after, he launched Apple Watch, he launched AirPods. So I could see Tim Cook launching this, or maybe stepping down right before this, and then this will be what defines the era, for example, John Turnus, if he happens to be the next Apple CEO, like I have predicted a few times on this channel. So I've been rambling or talking quite a lot, yapping, as Riley calls it. Let's see if there have been any leaks or rumors that have come out. Okay, so iOS 18.6 Beta 2 released recently, and now the public beta is also out now. Oh, there are also Foundation Season 3 reviews are out, and they seem to be very positive. That's nice. But none of that is really big news and rumors. And then when it comes to Mac rumors, let's briefly check if there's anything up there. Nothing launches transparent over-ear headphones. I do not care about that. Just as I do not care about the Nothing Phone 3. I covered its terrible design. That's all I needed to see about it. Maybe once reviews come out, I'll give it some small coverage. But yeah, this is like, I don't know why anybody would buy this over like the Sony headphones. Sure, it's cheaper, but it looks like ass. Yeah, it's all those stupid gimmicks with nothing. It's like, oh, this looks a little bit transparent, as if like we haven't had like translucent plastic bags for like ever since technology, like big consumer tech, actually became a thing. Yeah, but that's about it for today, man. I'm so spent. It's almost 2 hour stream in this freaking heat. I'm so glad I could still make it, and so glad we even got like a new Discord member out of all of that. Still plenty of you guys in the chat, so thank you so much for joining. Before I leave you, I'll give you as usual by popular demand, I'll give you big marks so you can see all my pores in high definition. But yeah, I'll just give you a last shout out for you to please do all the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Think about commenting not just live, but also comment on the video afterwards. We have some people who do that every time, and some people who don't do it all. So that would be very much appreciated. It really helps with the algorithm. You can also send me a super chat or super sticker whenever you catch me live. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max Maximus, and Jonathan, our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. You can also join over on Patreon, though usually I know a lot of people have went to Patreon in the past to like go with the free tier, so you can send me DMs there. Just go to Discord. It's in the links linked to the channel, just like Twitter. I am back on Twitter, but it's only tech stuff on there. I have done some console warring, but I consider that tech stuff, but no politics. So it's still a hellhole of a platform. You basically have to ignore the entire For You section, or you'll just turn into a Nazi after 15 minutes, or a tanky communist. I mean, I'll be fair. Both insane sides are fairly represented over there. Thank you guys so much. This was really fun, but now I have to drink a lot of water and I'll have to go to the bathroom. So I'll see you guys next time. Again, I'll probably be streaming on Thursday, and I will actually be giving you my reports on the MagSafe PowerBank from Basius that I just ordered. And except for that, we'll see. I mean, I didn't expect the new MacBook rumors to be that I covered today. I definitely didn't expect the Vision Pro rumors and Apple Glasses rumors. So yeah, we'll have probably plenty to talk about. And if not, then I might actually try gaming. Now again, because of the macOS Tahoe beta bug with my Mac getting super hot, let's take out TG Fan Pro again. Right? Really hot stuff. I'm not sure if I'm feeling comfortable with playing games while streaming, while charging my Mac, while putting out a charge and connecting wired to my iPhone. But hey, we'll see. It's supposedly a lot cooler starting on Thursday. I'm not streaming tomorrow because tomorrow is going to be living hell. 99 degrees Fahrenheit for you guys in America, 36 degrees Celsius for all those of you who live in a country with normal temperature measurements. Yeah, that's about it for today. Thank you so much for joining. As always, let me know what else you would like to see me cover next. I'll catch you then. This is MarkTech. tuning out.